Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Operationalizing MITRE ATT&CK for your SIEM with Devo with Mike Lyons, Director of Product Management. We're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to trickle in here, and then we'll get started. Just some housekeeping items. If you have any technical issues or you have any questions or comments as we're going here, please put them in the Q&A chat that you'll see. You'll also see a request a demo button. If you want to follow up and request a customized demo with our team, please use that tool. And we're going to get started here in just a few minutes. All right, Mike, whenever you want to take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ellie. And welcome, everyone. It's an exciting day here on Thursday. And so today, I'd like to talk about kind of MITRE ATT&CK and how we've integrated that into Devo, our SIEM. So just a little introduction to myself. My name is Michael Lyons. I'm Director of Product Management here at Devo. I'm specifically for our SciSec threat research team. It's a large team of security researchers and data scientists, and we also have content engineers that help us build some applications as well. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So just a little review of the agenda that we have today. Basically, we'll be going through kind of an overview of MITRE, how we can use that as kind of how to mature your approach to kind of detection and investigation and response. Talk about how, with this new application, how Devo can help you kind of move up that maturity curve. I'll do a little bit of demo of that application itself, and plenty of time for a Q&A today as well. So, I'll be monitoring the Q&A box throughout the session, try to answer those questions as quickly as I can. Otherwise, if you want to speak up and ask, using your voice, I'll have a Q&A session, right after the presentation and right after the demo as well. Cool. So let's kind of talk about some of the problems that security teams are facing, right? And kind of how they struggle to kind of mature their threat detection response, right? And this was, we talked to, dozens of customers to kind of understand, how are they using MITRE ATT&CK today, and how did that work with their SIEM, and how are they, working with other products that they had so far. And we kind of had some major pain areas kind of that were, the SOC teams we talked to kind of struggled. And this was definitely universal as well, right? We found this both in smaller SOCs as well as bigger ones, time constraints, reporting and things like that. Definitely, cramped down on the time, right? And so one of the big ones is just, it's pretty hard for, SOC and security organizations to pull together the relevant threat actor information if they in kind of one place so they can see it across the board, right? So what this means is, if you're part of an ISAC, for example, or you're part of, some sort of community and you're watching a particular set of APTs because, they target your industry, or your particular vertical, whatever it might be, it was hard to kind of pull together that full list. Was it 5, 12, 20, maybe even 30 different threat actor groups, and kind of get a view of, what are the typical attack patterns that they use, and then making sure that you're optimizing your coverage for those, right? And it's just a hard thing to do given the current tools that exist today. On top of that, it was also just, generally hard to understand kind of the value, within a SIEM today, right? Like how are you covered to the MITRE attack? Most people are actually doing this like by hand, right? They're like using like spreadsheets and other things like that. And it's just like a very tedious job. And so it just wasn't something that was easily done, at a regular basis. And so they were definitely not keeping up with the latest. And then the last one was also difficulty communicating upwards. So, there's a lot of executive reporting, a lot of things that, kind of help you, from a heuristic standpoint, communicate upwards of, the great work that you're doing, as a security team, right? And you need effective ways to communicate that outwards. So certainly a challenge in that regard to kind of communicate upwards. And dovetails actually with the first one as well, which is how do I communicate upwards about a set of threat groups and making sure that I have coverage there as well. So certainly some interesting challenges that we kind of discovered as we were talking to our customer base about this particular app. So just a little bit of history. I figured we'd go into a little bit of history just because I do like a little bit of history. It gives you a little bit of context of where certain things came from, and sometimes the history kind of gives you like a little more intrigue into the ideas, right? So let's just kind of talk about the MITRE organization for a little bit, right? So MITRE has been around for a long time, right? They were actually founded in 1958, chartered as a private not-for-profit company. They focus, on engineering and like technical stuff, like primarily for the federal government. They definitely get large grants, some of the $400 million grants and things like that to go and do research. And actually, interestingly enough, it was originally spun out of MIT Lincoln Labs in 1958. And so they're located both close to us, Devo in Boston and in Bedford, Massachusetts, but they also have a large presence in McLean, Virginia. And in just MITRE over the history, right, they've really provided cutting edge solutions to some of the world's most pressing problems. And those have been in a number of different domains, such as, cybersecurity, the battlefield, healthcare, and just a ton more. So they just have a lot of like pretty cool research coming out of there. Not only that, I've met a few people I've worked with MITRE before, and boy, they know their stuff, and it's a smart bunch of people over there. And specifically, obviously, in the domain of cybersecurity, and what we're here to talk about is they developed the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and that's to better understand the tactics and techniques employed by threat actors. And it's kind of cool from the MITRE's approach, right, is it helps you kind of understand the full context, the attack life cycle, and the intent, but also kind of gives you a kind of a collaborative framework that helps you understand, or gives you a common language. It's produced through a collaborative framework, so not only does MITRE contribute, other people contribute as well, to help discuss kind of the tactics and techniques that advanced persistent threats will employ to kind of get into your organization and cause impact and data exfiltration and whatnot. And so if we get a little more deeper on MITRE ATT&CK itself, right? So MITRE is obviously for the corporation itself, but ATT&CK actually stands for Adversarial Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge, right? And so the MITRE organization, in cooperation with a lot of other people, really developed this framework through tons of observations. And so that is, they went out and actually studied these APTs, right? APT 23, or my favorite, Bronze Butler, or Sandworm and things like that. And really started to get hands-on and kind of observed kind of the tactics and techniques, right? So if I break that apart, the tactics here in this framework represent the why of an attack, or a particular stage of that attack, right? So why is someone going after this, right? So here it's like defense evasion, and or data exfiltration or impacting your system, for example, from a tactic perspective. And then underneath each tactic, you have a series of techniques. And the techniques here are just how an adversary is actually conducting that why. They have an intent of whether they want to do something, and this is how they're actually going about accomplishing that goal, right? And then you can actually go a level deeper, and they have gone a level deeper with sub-techniques as well. Sub-techniques, they're just more or less more specific versions. So, if there's a large variety of a certain technique used across a number of different threat actors, they got more specific in certain categories about those particular types of attacks. It just helps them get more specific about what that threat actor is actually trying to do. I say there's definitely hands-on research, and they definitely have been collating a lot of threat intel and incident reporting as well as from the data sources. So another big thing and kind of what's important about attack is it's evolving as well. So there's updates every 6 months to make sure that we're always keeping track of this large number of threat actors, and making sure that when things are used quickly in the field, that we're kind of getting the appropriate coverage in place as well using the framework. So another important aspect, right, and I'd be remiss not to touch on it as part of this particular conversation, and I'm sure many of you on the line have already seen the pyramid of pain. And this was originally popularized back in 2013 by David Bianco. And basically, it just sort of shows about different ways that you can detect adversaries in your environment, right? So you start down sort of some of the trivial stuff, like hash values for particular programs that are running on endpoints, IP addresses, kind of get a lot of that information through proxies and firewalls. And as you kind of move up, right, domain names, network artifacts, and then you get to the tool level. That gets a little bit more difficult and challenging to sort of understand that particular, how the tool is, how the tool is being introduced, kind of what is it the tool trying to accomplish. But the hardest thing, right, is going to be the tactics and techniques, right, the TTPs. And the procedures used there. This is, it's really hard to understand it because the biggest thing is that, you employ one technique, but those techniques are oftentimes paired with each other, right? So, threat actors typically going to move from, the left-hand side of that MITRE ATT&CK matrix to the right-hand side, may use a variety of different techniques, both within a single tactic and across those different tactics. And so having a sort of a framework that kind of links those things together makes it more easily to kind of get and level up on this pyramid of pain to really help there. And, it really helps kind of the analyst kind of track and kind of understand and contextualize a little bit more, especially when those alerts are paired off with entities and things like that. You kind of get a deeper view into what's going on there. And this is certainly where MITRE ATT&CK is going to help. So, why are SOC teams using MITRE today, right? So I think there's a couple of reasons. Again, we kind of uncovered these through a number of conversations, right? And a lot of this is sort of, industry best practice as well. The first is, they can better identify, anticipate and identify, group behaviors and TTPs that they're going to be vulnerable to, right? So, it's really collating that information in one place, being able to look at, what are areas that, maybe my red team or maybe my internal teams were kind of focused on maybe one area, one sort of attack vector. And so this really puts everything kind of on the board and kind of encourages some critical thinking in terms of the direction that we want to go in as well, in terms of, adding additional coverage. Also, like I was mentioning there, in terms of the TTPs, kind of getting more context around a larger attack pattern, especially within your specific environment. This is really kind of linking those different techniques across different tactics in the environment, and just sort of provides a larger context and sort of a timeline, and kind of a newer version of the kill chain, if you will. It also helps you prioritize investigations and increase efficiency from having the additional context for the alerts themselves, right? So it definitely dovetails with the above piece. Yeah, but there's both kind of the automated way to search things and kind of stitch that timeline together, but there's also the ability to kind of prioritize the investigation based on some of the techniques that are used, right? So the further to the right you are, like let's say you're at the data exfiltration point, or command and control, that's going to be a higher priority, right? To actually go and kind of take care of and investigate those sooner. So it really helps kind of the analyst contextualize some of those things as well. And lastly, not least, assess the effectiveness of defenses in areas needing proactive threat hunting, right? So this is going to give you some ideas of things you can go search, some of the threat hunts, right? If you have a limited number of threat hunts that your team has capacity for on a weekly basis, MITRE ATT&CK can kind of be a framework to kind of help you guide about certain things that you should be hunting for or looking for in your data. All right, so why are we embedding MITRE into Devo itself, right? So, Devo, the biggest thing with Devo is just, its ability to ingest lots and lots of data and all in one place. It's super easy to just get data in there, right? And so, when it comes to kind of a point of full visibility, across, endpoint data, network data, and logging data from various different applications or other types of technology, the SIEM just really makes a good place to kind of centralize all that information in one place. And because of that, central place with all that visibility, it makes it easier for teams to actually operationalize the MITRE ATT&CK framework itself. So because you have that full visibility across, you can put that all in there and get a nice view of that as well. And it also enables our customers to take ingested data and detections in Devo and make the necessary adjustments, right? So now that you have the full visibility, you have the full framework in place, now you can start to tweak and touch the various knobs, if you will, to kind of add the additional detection, add those additional log sources that are important to your specific organization. And last but not least, right, SciSec, which is Devo's security threat research brand. We added the MITRE to the Devo platform as a testament to the team's mission to transform threat research, because not only is it going to help our customers, right, but from a research perspective, what we're doing is we have an out-of-the-box collection of alerts. Now that we have MITRE that are labeled with MITRE ATT&CK, now that we have the app, we can understand what is our full coverage from an out-of-the-box experience that we're giving to our teams, right? And now we can start to optimize our research and our output of detections that release on a monthly basis to make sure that we're getting good coverage and delivering good value to our customers, especially on day one, right? Out of the box content is it's really important, especially for those on less mature SOCs. And so making sure that we give them a fair variety across the techniques is something that's really important for the protection as well. All right, so with the MITRE ATT&CK Adviser, you are able to gain confidence by leveraging the dynamic MITRE ATT&CK coverage heat maps. So this is going to allow you to look at the tactics and techniques, and each of those little cards is going to be highlighted with different colors, which you'll see in the demo here shortly. And this will kind of give you, some of the red or orange ones that kind of keys you into areas we're going to have to go take action, right? And so if you've kind of added additional stuff, you can, get more confident that you're getting good coverage with MITRE ATT&CK. At the end of the day, this is still a heuristic in terms of, your coverage. So it's not, by checking all the boxes, you don't protect yourself against all adversaries, but it really helps you gain confidence that you have good coverage in areas. It's hard to think about all the different techniques or suspend them in your brain all at once. Additionally, you're going to be able to gain visibility into your data sources against MITRE as well. So you can, based on the log sources that Devo, and you're ingesting into Devo, based on kind of that optimized out-of-the-box content, you can also see where value against the MITRE ATT&CK framework can be added by adding additional log sources to your SIEM, right? So you kind of understand, if, let's say, maybe you've got primarily Windows machines, but you want to start adding some Unix machines, or you have a few of them, but you're not logging them today, for example. You can kind of understand from the Unix perspective, if I start onboarding those, what is the additional protection I would get? What are those log sources online, and what's kind of the out-of-the-box value that we can provide you on day one? And last, you can gain the clarity, right? And this really dovetails with the threat groups I mentioned at the beginning. We have the ability to group by multiple threat groups and kind of get an idea on the matrix. What are the techniques being used? So if you have ones that you're tracking, which was oftentimes the case from customers that we were talking to, they just had lists of ones that they were tracking, and they, especially when Ukraine was invaded by Russia, all of the APTs from Russia lit up. It was like a Christmas tree, and they were all concerned and wanted to look at them, and so they had the whole list there. And so now with this app, when something like that happens, you can put all those threat actors in one place and get the full view across that, and really help get some clarity in terms of how well you're protecting against specific nation states. All right. And so that's it for the presentation section. So I will pause here for a moment while I make sure I get the demo on my side to work, and I'll answer a few questions now as I get everything ready on my end. Don't see any questions in the chat. Sure about connectivity of the system here. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get to the demo section of this as well. All right, I think we're working now. All right, so this is the Devo platform. If you're not too familiar with it, number of different capabilities, but one of the more powerful things about the Devo platform is that there's an application framework built on top of it. So there's a lot of built-in ability to do kind of ingesting that data and then viewing that data and doing a number of analytics using kind of active boards and searching and parsing that data for the specific use cases using data search, for example. But we have these framework for both tools and applications to be built on top of the Devo platform. And these allow you to do all sorts of different powerful use cases or flows that are specific to different customer types across security operations, across IT operations, and other things like that. And the MITRE ATT&CK Adviser fits exactly into that application framework. And all it does is leverage a lot of existing services on the back end of Devo and try to centralize all of that into one unified user experience here with the MITRE ATT&CK Adviser. And so there's two main areas of this particular application. The first is going to be alert coverage. That's going to be specific to alerts or detections that we have out of the box, as well as the custom alerts you have. And then there's also a log source summary that kind of maps the log sources you're ingesting into your Devo domain against the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. So if we go ahead and dig into the alert coverage, we have certainly got some information in here, and we also have the ability and links back out to the MITRE site itself, such that if you're curious and want to drill down further, you get more information about MITRE. But part of this, you're basically greeted by the full matrix here across all the different tactics and the different techniques. You've got the different overflows here. So you've got the so for a create account here, you've got the technique description, and you've got kind of a highlight here of the number of alerts that you have installed. And if you click on this, this will actually bring you out to the MITRE website, so you can actually get the full context of that technique if you needed to, or if you didn't understand kind of what it's looking for as you're trying to make adjustments in your SIEM. As you can see across the top, we've got the different tactics here as well, and we've got a coverage scale. And the way that this coverage scale works is, if there's no content in the system, then we're just, and that's because certain ones across the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, that might not be present in your particular SIEM, might not be applicable, or there just might not be any content today. Signature-based library that we have, some of them are more behavior-based that we aren't tracking in this app today. And then as far as the low goes, if you don't have any coverage, it's kind of a low. If you've got part of the coverage for the alerts that you have today, it's partial coverage, and it's green if you've got the full coverage and whatnot. So how that translates for the color coding of the actual tactics itself. If you've got some coverage for every technique underneath a specific tactic, then that tactic is going to go to the green. If you've got some red in there, you're going to get some partial coverage in there for that particular tactic. And if you have no coverage in there, it would be red. So if you had red for all the techniques, then that would go to the red there. For the actual techniques themselves, it's a little bit of a different calculation. It's done based on the number of alerts. So if you look at this icon down here, it says 1 out of 5. Increase the text here a little bit. So you got like 1 out of 5, right? So I've got some partial coverage. This one says 0 out of 1 or 0 out of 3. That's when these are red because you don't have any coverage, right? And so that's going to drive you to kind of investigate. Well, Devo is offering me some protection in this particular area. Maybe you can go ahead and investigate and look into some of those, right? So if I look at maybe, say, command and control, I've got very little coverage there, for example. And I can actually click on the application layer protocol, and I can actually scroll down here to the bottom table. And this table is actually being filtered itself by the actual tactic, so command and control, and the technique filter here for the application level protocol. And I can see here that Devo is providing me 3 firewall-based alerts for command and control. And I can see here that indeed I'm ingesting this particular data source. So this is going to tell me what is the data source or Devo table that I need to ingest data into in order to start making use of these alerts. And with this green check mark here, that tells me that I'm actually ingesting this data. So I can actually go ahead and take action on this if I wanted to, right? And I'll show that in a minute where I go ahead and take some action on that and actually install that particular detection, and I can increase my coverage. Additionally, I can do filtering down here on this particular table. So let's have a tactic, for example, and I get kind of a high-level summary. So let's say you didn't want to look at, obviously the matrix is cool and flashy, and you're going to want to show that to your manager, for example. But you come down here and get more of a tabular view of the same set of data. And so this is, if we look at the tactic level, I can understand my technique coverage. Again, the command and control, we got some stuff lacking there. It looks like I got partial coverage in a bunch of different areas. I can also see, for example, in this particular case, so for initial access, I could kind of see that for related sources or data sources, log sources in Devo, right? I can also see kind of, am I ingesting all of those log sources in here and kind of get a full view, right? So I've got a full list down of here, and I've got all sorts of, it looks like I'm missing a lot of G Suite and Azure, but obviously in this environment, I've got my AWS, so that's sort of, I'm not using all the clouds here. And then last but not least, over here in the last column, we got that alert count. This is counting all the alerts across all the techniques and giving you basically a ratio here of how many of those that you have. And within this, I can actually go ahead and let's say click on here, and that'll filter by the tactic to the technique. And then I can get sort of a very similar view for related sources for the specific techniques underneath that tactic. And of course, I could drill down even further, for example, and that'll give me the full list of alerts. And of course, I can also search by the name over here. So if I search query, for example, it'll trim down the table. So if I'm looking for a specific alert or maybe something that's working on HTTP or let's say log4j, for example, so log4shell in this case, I can filter that down and I can actually go to the full all tactics, all techniques, for example. Yeah, and I can look at all the alerts down there. All right. Now, if I come back up to the matrix, what I can see is if I took, there's a couple of other things that I can do up here. So the other thing I can do is I can actually turn on the full matrix here. So if I go ahead and click that, that will actually go ahead and show every single technique that's possible across all the different tactics. Of course, some of these have a lot more depth than other ones, like defense evasion, for example. And this just gives you the context, right, of kind of maybe additional techniques. Of course, not all of these are covered necessarily. They might be in different tools, or just today, based on the content that we provide, there's nothing out of the box. But you can, in fact, add custom alerts to show up in here as well. So you could start to add additional content types to those, and then that'll be either that'll show up in the non-full matrix view. But the full matrix just gives you the full context of everything that's possible, just to give you guidance in terms of maybe some different attack vectors that you should look into. The other cool part here is going to be the threat group filters. So I could turn that on. That's going to enable this little filter here. And underneath here, we've basically got every single threat group that MITRE tracks. And so we've got our favorite threat group here, Bronze Butler. And I can actually go ahead and select Bronze Butler here. And if I hover over the name, I get kind of an idea of what that particular threat group is doing, right? So here it says cyber espionage group likely of Chinese origin. I've been familiar with any Bronze Butlers in China, but I've never been there, so who knows? Not only that, let's say I've got Bronze Butler. Let's say I'm interested in a couple other ones too, right? So let's see. I think Sandworm. That's certainly a popular Russian state actor one. And maybe let's see. I can find another one. Wizard Spider's another good one. And so I can just keep adding the number of threat groups that I want here, right? So if I want to, let's see, AP3 28, for example, and I could just keep adding these different threat actors. I can understand more in depth about each of those threat groups. And as you can see down here, the matrix is updating every time I add a threat group, right? So if that threat group utilizes some different techniques in different areas of the matrix, it'll start to add those techniques in here as sort of the merge or superset of all of those together. And if, let's say, you know the entire group of Russian state actors or Chinese state actors, you can basically select them all, and you can understand your coverage against maybe that particular category of threats. Or if something's from your list is from your ISAC, for example, you can see that here, and you can get a view into your data and understand how well protected you are against all the tactics and techniques that are used by those particular threat groups. And then last but not least, that was it for basically alert coverage. But we've also got log source summary here as well. So in here, what we're seeing is, again, it's the matrix. We're color coding it, but this time we're doing it by the number of data sources that are available for that particular tactic or technique, and then color coding it. So there might be basically what this does is identify opportunities for you to actually onboard additional log sources into the Devo platform and kind of enable some additional content on top of that. So like here I can see I've got basically drive-by compromise or software deployment tools, and I can kind of highlight that. I can understand more about the technique, and you can also see from here what is not being ingested from that particular the data source is not being ingested for that particular technique. So how the log coverage scale works here, again, it's the 0, partial, and complete list here. So if you got the complete, it goes green, and if it's got partial, you got the orangish color here, and red if you've got none of those data sources. And of course, down here at the bottom, we've also got all the data sources listed and organized here by their status. So you can see all the sources that you're currently ingesting, and you can go ahead and actually understand, what are all the sources that I'm not ingesting, for example. So, if I have some Office 365, or maybe I'm using G Suite, I can start to onboard that, and I can go through here and understand, from this particular log source, what are the additional tactics I can get coverage from? What are the additional techniques I can get coverage from? And kind of listing out, if I did enable this source, what are some net new ones, right? So for example, here, cloud.gcp, if I had GCP data, I can see that, I would get an additional 5 techniques if I were to actually onboard this data source, for example. Or the G Suite report tokens, I'd onboard 2 new ones, right? So you can kind of get an idea quickly looking at this tabular view, what's sort of the additional value that you would get from this as well. And of course, we've got all the alerts that are available for those particular log sources as well. So you can see here, like for Azure, we got like 10. For the Office 365, we've got the different ones, we've got like 10, 19. So there's definitely a lot of alerts that could be installed here. Then we've got other things around Windows to tons and AWS, which are big ingesters in this particular domain. I'm going to see that for that log source, I've got quite a bit of the coverage installed there as well. And so if for this one, if in order to take action here, you have to kind of work with the Devo team to kind of onboard those new data sources. And once that's enabled, you can start to enable the alerts on top of that data source. And so once you get the table ingesting with that configuration, you can turn this particular one green, and then you can start adding the content and change that technique box to green as well. All right, so now that we're kind of going back and making some of those adjustments, I'm just going to go and actually make a little bit of a change here, just to kind of demonstrate how you would go about adding that additional coverage, right? So with this count manipulation, I click on that. I've got a number of different alerts in here, right? So I've got all these different SecOps alerts for AWS, and I notice that I've got 2 here, one for permissions boundary to role and to user. This one is particularly interesting, right? So I'm interested in kind of installing that and improving my coverage here for account manipulation. So I'll go over to the Security Operations app, which is the main. There's a couple ways to add additional alerts to Devo. You can use the Devo Exchange, where there's a number of alert packs that are there, and there's also within Security Operations we have something called the Content Manager. In both cases, we are able to distribute alerts instantly to our entire customer base after thorough testing, and then it'll be available right within that, right within the domain to improve and increase coverage. Right. So today, Devo provides over 350 out-of-the-box detections to our customers, specific to security operations type use cases. We do have other alerts for other particular types of use cases, but these are just the set for security and are most relevant to MITRE ATT&CK. And so all that content can be made available instantly. And so in this example, I've got the list of my alerts that are installed up here. And what I can do is I can come down to this alerts configurator screen. I can actually go here, so permission. We're looking for, we want the one with the user, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and install this alert into this domain. It's going to do a quick load of that alert, install it, run the UI. Looks like we've got a successful installation of this new alert. Now at this point, I would probably go and do some tuning on that particular detection for my environment. But in this case, I'll go ahead back to my app, do a quick refresh here. So we re-pull from the installed alerts category. Real quick, painting all the alerts that are installed in the domain, just to give us the latest and greatest view into all the content here, right? So click on it, there we go, account manipulation. And what you can see is the SecOps AWS permission boundary modified to user is now in the installed, and that I've improved my coverage for account manipulation just by a few simple clicks. And I think the last thing that I do want to mention here, if I go over here to the data search and I go to lookup management, and I go for the SecOps alert description lookup here. And so this particular lookup and this particular domain, this is where, go ahead and edit this. And so if you want to, so today we provide this lookup out of the box that gives all the MITRE ATT&CK mapping for all the out of the box detections. And if you are to write, let's say, which is commonly done, is that customers will write their own detections or alerts with their own MITRE ATT&CK mapping. And what we do is we provide this particular lookup that allows the enrichment into the SecOps application. But if you add that information into this particular lookup, so for example, the tactic is here, and the technique is in this column. This is 3 and 4 here. If you put the information in here, the app will also look in this lookup. So if you have a bunch of custom detections that you are installing into your domain, you just add the MITRE information to this lookup, and it'll automatically pull that information into the application for you to visualize as well. All right, I think from a demo standpoint, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. The last thing I'll say is kind of more details, and if anything wasn't clear or you don't remember anything, we do have up on our docs.devo.com, we've got the complete documentation here. It steps you through kind of how to make some of those updates that I covered today, as well as how to add those custom detections in here. So you don't have to remember this, you have to frantically take notes. We've got that all well documented up on our public webpage as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pivot back here. So that concludes the demo portion here. And I will move over to the Q&A. So it looks like we've got some questions here. And feel free, if you'd like to speak up or use the audio, feel free to ask those questions, and I'll look at the Q&A in here. Oh, Vlad is asking, how do you actually get the MITRE ATT&CK Adviser installed? So that is an excellent question here. So actually, I'll go ahead and share my screen again, because that's a good question, and I apologize I left that out. So, let's see, tool. All right, we're sharing again. So in every Devo domain, you should have something called the Exchange within that domain. And so if you click in here, the Exchange is our ability to push content packs to our customers or partner to be able to push content packs. And if I go in here and I search in here, you can actually click on in here, and basically you click on the install button. The Devo Exchange should be in everyone's domain. If it's not, we can contact support or your customer success manager, and we'll make sure to get that in place. And you can basically install this and get it into your domain. Let's see, Jennifer Kendall asks, why in the SOC dashboard we do not see any default alerts? I'm not sure I entirely understand the question, but the in the alert coverage screen, there is basically what we're seeing in the demo I showed, where the 355 out of the box detections map to MITRE ATT&CK. So that's the default that we have out of the box, and you can also add custom ones that you put in there as well. Jennifer, Randall, and then and Jennifer, if you want to clarify your question, feel free to use the audio to do that. I think Jennifer, you asked another question. Why would you see a log source as not ingesting? You can see the table in the data search with data. Even if there was not any data, I would think it would still show as ingesting. Can you show how to enable an alert like 2.6 is on? Where do you see that? Let me dissect that a little bit. Since the first question here. So why would you see a log source as not ingesting? You can see the data in the table in data search with data. So the check for so the check for whether a data source is ingesting or not right now just queries to see if there's been data ingested in the last 7 days. So it's a view of your currently ingesting data. So it's focused on the current ingestion. And can you show how to enable an alert like 2.6 is there? I think I showed that in the later part of the demo, right? Which is to go to either the Devo Exchange for installing alerts or into the SecOps Content Manager. So yeah, Jennifer, if I didn't Sorry, I've been told there's no audio for attendees. I apologize. Yeah, so Jennifer, you'd like to maybe clarify the question in the Q&A box. I'll give you a minute if you want to ask a more deep question or make any clarifications. Jeff adds some clarification here. Okay, Jennifer, if you have the app installed today and you're having some issues, let's reach out to support and get that resolved. I'm happy to have someone on my team take a deeper look at that. So I apologize if there's any issues. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And there was another question, but I don't know. Oh, there we go. Anmal. Anmal asks, this mapping is visible across another SIM that I use, but the issue is that I am not able to validate the tactics, some techniques that they claim to cover are actually covered by the detection logic, which they use for their rules. How can SIMs be more transparent that way? That's actually a good question. So I guess the way I understand it is, how can SIMs generally be more transparent? I guess across different SIMs that are being used. Well, I think the biggest thing is definitely going to be the labeling of those particular alerts. I also think that Sigma rules has a role to play here as well. So like a common language between the different SIMs to sort of translate them all into one place. Again, that's kind of a little bit of work today on the customer's part to do that and make use of the publicly available Sigma converters that are there to get that all into one place. And as far as transparency into actually detecting things, that's also kind of an interesting question. I mean, I can't really speak for other vendors, but what I can say is what we do personally at Devo is we're making sure that we generate data. So there's a sort of a different team that's within threat research that is doing more of the data generation, either using a threat research lab or our open source adversary simulation tool to make sure that we're getting that testing right. I guess, in the long term, we're looking to kind of open source that and make that more integral into the platform and even embedded into Exchange as well to make that more transparent and understandable to our customers. Because I do agree. I mean, it's opaque and it's a hard thing to understand. So we'll definitely be progressively adding new features here as well. All right, Kyle asks, will there be a team assigned to update the framework in line with new framework releases? Good question, absolutely. So the first release that we had, we actually started building that with before MITRE ATT&CK version 11 came into place. I guess I could talk about, we'll have another release of the MITRE app, sort of a version 2 coming out in quarter 3, about midway. So probably look for that in the August timeframe. Is my best guess based on kind of the progress of the team right now. And that will be updating it to MITRE ATT&CK version 11. And as part of those updates as well, we also put some automation in place to be able to kind of take the necessary information from the MITRE webpage. It would be nice if they provided an API for us to kind of go through and take some of that or make it easier to consume that information. But we do have automation in place to kind of make sure that we're continuing to update that, right? So every 6 months, it's a little bit of work, but we have a content engineering team that's dedicated to that. Kyle also asks, how do you cope with mapping sources such as EDR and that they cover many techniques and may superficially inflate coverage? Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it helps to have that all in one place. Yeah, and I think it would add a lot of coverage in like specific areas and kind of look like you've got more coverage in certain areas. You know, it's again, like I guess I emphasize the fact that it's a heuristic, more so than like a definite thing. And kind of conversations I've had with some of our larger customers, coming up with like that proper threshold of, you know, what's the right amount of content for a particular technique is just it's just a difficult. There's not like a set thing. I think maybe over time, as we look at kind of optimizing for threat research, we'll take some of these things into account and maybe have like a more thought out point of view on it. But I think everyone's, you know, I think it helps a lot to have the app to start with, because then you understand it in a lot more detail and you make the necessary adjustments. And then as we kind of run into these additional problems, we can start to understand them more. So definitely a good question. Not sure we have a great answer to that, even within our industry. And Vladislav asks, will the webinar be recorded and posted? Yes, the webinar is being recorded, and that will be posted later on. Let's see. Any other questions out there? Happy to answer any other questions that you have today. Got a couple more minutes allocated to this webinar. And again, I would like to, you know, of course, thank all of our attendees today. You know, it's, you know, really appreciate the time. You know, it's kind of a new thing that we're coming out from our SciSec team. And this is the first of many applications. And, you know, with the MITRE ATT&CK Adviser, we're also looking in the next quarter, adding some additional features as well. So, you know, we're going to be adding additional filters. We're going to be, you know, adjusting the coverage scale a little bit. We're also going to be adding information about sub-techniques into the application as well, so you can put some of that information in there. And on top of that, one of the bigger ones is we're actually adding a configuration section as well. So basically what you'll be able to do is we have all the alerts and log sources listed in there from the out-of-the-box standpoint. And what you can do is, let's say your organization uses maybe AWS, but they don't use Azure and GCP. I can actually go in and toggle off the data sources that are irrelevant, and that doesn't impact my coverage scale. So that way you can, you know, use it as the heuristic, continue to add, and you can get closer to that 100% mark and kind of get a good level of coverage. And I think that's going to help a lot for the use cases around outbound reporting, executive reporting, things like that. Jen says, thank you. No, thank you for attending, Jennifer. John asks, if we add our own mappings or custom content, would that need to be re-added every time you upgrade or add content? It shouldn't be. That you should be able to kind of adjust or add to that lookup file, you know, over time. So it shouldn't overwrite it with our content releases. Cool. Yep, and as always, for those who are current customers and you're playing around with the app and you have any ideas or features or things like that, you know, I'm happy to jump on a call and talk about kind of some more additional use cases or additional perspectives on there. Yes, Vlad says keep doing more stuff, more out of the box detections and more active boards. Yes, absolutely, Vlad. I also share that from a SciSec perspective, as we look towards the next quarter, we're committed. We're going to add about 120 more detections. I think we'll probably get close to 500 by the end of next quarter across the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And additionally, as we align to specific data sources as well, we're looking at providing out-of-the-box active boards. And there's also some application development as well, or some of our common data sources, such as AWS and Palo Alto networks and so on. So plenty of more content to come. And if you have ideas for it, reach out to your CSM, and I'm happy to jump on a call. And if you're a prospect and you want to learn more about the security roadmap, I'm also happy to jump on a call and walk through that. So certainly contact us if you want, especially a deeper demo of anything as well. So happy to continue the conversation. So I think that will be it for today's webinar. So again, thank you everyone thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it. And this is just the beginning of our trip with MITRE. We'll be adding all sorts of new content and additional things to the MITRE app going forward. So thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate it.